Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. All right, so I'm going to give you a sort of naive presentation as a writer who's just beginning to encounter people writing with AI. So the title of the talk is Cyborg Authorship, Humans Writing with AI. And just to run through a few assumptions that I have that humanities people talk about, that most people probably don't worry about who actually work with AI. Is AI becoming conscious? And is consciousness necessary for creativity? My short answers are no and no. Human consciousness is a whole body experience that entails a completely different sensory apparatus than that currently afforded to computers. AIs will not feel human and most likely never will because they do not occupy human flesh or have the human sensory apparatus. This does not mean that AIs are not conscious or are not cognizers as opposed to conscious. It also doesn't mean that AI cannot be created. My thinking on this kind of goes back to the theorist Catherine Hales, who describes cognition as a process that interprets information within contexts that connect it with meaning. AIs are thus in this context non-conscious cognizers that operate in assemblage with conscious cognition of humans, as well as other cognitive systems. So for example, I would say that forests or animals are also cognitive systems, as well as something like a citywide surveillance apparatus. Okay, so what is happening with language models? This is something that most of you are very familiar with, but what's happened very quickly, really over the past 4 years, is we've seen very extensive growth in language models, both in terms of the numbers of parameters, which is where the massive computation power takes place and is required, and in terms of data sets. And right now, I think what's happening is people are trying to figure out the right balance between a massive data set and a massive parameter set. Of course, the massive parameters are very ecologically devastating, right? And also exclusive in a way that only a few companies in the world have the ability to run these systems on the cloud. So there is an interesting balancing taking place where it turns out that you actually have better language interpretation and response when you have more language as opposed to more parameters, more computation. The upshot is that right now, AIs are getting very good at interpreting and responding to human language, and this is occurring very quickly in almost exponential fashion. So, as a creative writer and as a literary scholar to a certain degree, I ask, what does this mean for authorship? Or to kind of put it more precisely in other ways, what is the human function within AI-driven creativity? Now, literary text generation is something that is not new and is not dependent on AI. So, for example, the first text generators really go back to the birth of the computer. Alan Turing's colleague Christopher Strachey wrote the love letter generator in 1952 on the Manchester University computer. The poems were actually signed by MUC, these sort of parodic love letters. And text generators such as poetry generation systems are still one of the most active genres of electronic literature. They're typically semi-aleatory computational processes with poetic structure and human writing. So humans write lines or phrases and recombine these according to structured, randomized processes with the individual authors providing vocabulary.
So AI isn't the only, nor at present necessarily the best computational process involved in text generation. And a significant recent strand of creative practice in ELIT is the publication of computer-generated books that use a variety of different hybrid practices to produce their output. And this ranges from very simple kind of slot style generators to just Python scripts, or really kind of any kind of computational process you can think of could be adapted to produce these sort of hybrid authorship books, including the travesty generator, which some of you will recognize probably that title from Hugh Kenner's program, I think back in the 1960s. And Lillian Yvonne Bertram used that to a certain degree in her recent poetry collection about race relations in America. And this book was actually nominated for a National Book Award last year. So what does creative AI mean for human authorship? What the AI is doing is cognition, not consciousness. The system doesn't care what it creates. I think that the black box problem is overstated. While we can't know precisely what paths an AI takes in response to a prompt, we can know how that box is constructed and what data sets it's trained and refined on. And all of these processes are still fundamentally driven by human system development, human input, and human response, very importantly, to the AI. Human authors interact and co-evolve the text with AI authors in feedback loops. And again, important to think about is the fact that nothing the AI produces is art or literature until a human perceives it as such. To the program, it's just data, right? Okay, so as a teacher, this is something that I'm interested and concerned about, that very soon, next year, maybe next semester, my freshman essays are quite likely to be written by AI, and it's quite likely to be very difficult for me to tell the difference. Here's a very good, I think, short answer by GPT-3 to a question: explain Plato's parable of the cave in relation to contemporary media culture. And the system is able to spit out as good an answer as many of our students would be able to. Okay, so here's three very short stories that I constructed with GPT-3, just experiments. So the first one, I was trying to do a kind of genre fiction, start of a genre fiction. It is the curse of the dragon, he said woefully, to be slain in such a withering way, 'tis pathetic. And I won't read the whole story. I tried to push it, you can read it with your eyes. I tried to push it a little bit in some different ways. I mixed Citizen Kane in there a little bit, and it gave a pretty good answer, like as you might when you watch Citizen Kane. I didn't know what he meant then, and I still don't know. But I was also trying to push it a little bit to be to get into the grittiness of the violence of a typical kind of fantasy story. And I said, but I am being ungenerous. I forgot to tell you how the dragon brought the old man to his piteous end. The interesting thing that you don't see here is that the moment I did that, it popped up with a trigger warning. And it said, I'm about to write something that may be upsetting to you, and it stopped. And there's also certain things built into the systems now because of the history of AI producing sometimes offensive and racist language as a result of the source text that'll simply not let you get into, right? In this case, violence is okay. If you get into sex, that's generally not okay. Which, if you think about Shakespeare, this is kind of problematic to the way that we might write literature. In this case, I posed some thoughts and questions about AI to the system, and the system seemed to train itself in a more rudimentary way after the first response. So I said there's still a fundamentally rudimentary, this is still a fundamentally rudimentary model of language, and it's certainly not consciousness. And it came back with a pretty good answer. And at the end of it, though, there's this interesting turn that occurs. The model of language presented here is very basic and does not include any notion of consciousness. And then I said, I'm neither a robot nor a parrot. And then it said this statement is false. But what happened, interestingly, is it says does not include any notion of consciousness, very basic. And then it decided henceforth that the language would be very basic, almost flippantly or obnoxiously, right? It's interesting. I say I'm both at the same time a model of parallel thinking. I'm impossible. It says, of course, this statement is true, but at the end, all of these falses. Suddenly a bear appeared. This statement is true. There wasn't there. In this one, I'm trying to think through, like, what are some of the ethical questions that we might ask of AI. So I presented with an ethical dilemma that might be illustrative, indeed, of some of the situations that AI might be called upon to mitigate. For example, how to allocate resources during a natural disaster. And it struggles, right? Now, this is different. I ask it, once we get into the nitty-gritty of it, what happens if there's a forest fire? What do I do about that? Some towns will burn. This is a difficult decision, but I believe the best course of action is to allow the fires to burn themselves out. This will minimize the loss of human life. But if I could save one child or one tree, would I let an old man burn? And this is an impossible question to answer. It depends on the individual situation. But in general, I try to save as many lives as possible, regardless of age. I think if the system was actually trained on the sort of data that they would use to actually mitigate forest fires, it would probably come up with a different answer. But what this is doing is modeling the human, the language of the human response to it. AI is already functioning as an interlocutor or co-author in very interesting ways. There's a project called Rewrites from 2017 by David Jave Johnson. And what he did for a year is wake up every morning and spend a couple of, he trained TensorFlow and PyTorch with GPT-2 with a large corpus of sort of every poem, classic poetry on the internet he could find. And then he woke up every morning after this training and spent a couple of hours editing the output from the system into coherent poetry, and then published a volume of co-authored poetry every month for a year, resulting in a 12-volume set of what's actually fairly interesting and pretty good poetry. There's novels now being written by AI, by this hybrid process, by people interlocuting with AI. One great story in Believer magazine called Ghost was written by an author who didn't know how to process her sister's death. So what she did is she operated iteratively with GPT-3, first writing very brief sentences that the system then filled in for, but doing this over time and through several iterations, she was actually able to confront the situation that she was dealing with and write about it in quite moving detail. And the AI served as a tool for that. So one just observation, I think in the books of the future, authors may be remembered by their prompts. There's the DALL-E 2 response to that. And I think I'm running short on time, is that correct?
It's a bit because Andy was a video, we could have a little extra time.
Okay, great.
As much time as possible.
Okay, so text to image generation. This is another direction that people are moving with as writers. We saw earlier a bit of Mez's portraits project, which really she's producing these very simple short prompts that are sort of function as character sketches. And then DALL-E 2 is returning these wonderful images that she then modifies. I'm doing a little experiment using the very rudimentary mini DALL-E or crayon, I think they're calling it now. But what's interesting to me in this experiment, Uncle Fred's Bestiary, is I'm trying to see what images the system delivers to me, and then let that guide the story in a recursive process in this short novella that I'm running. And lastly, I would add one story, not really a story, but a friend of mine who's an author and artist recently had to have, named Sean Mehmet, recently had to have a laryngectomy because he had throat cancer. And what he's using DALL-E 2 for is to imagine the work of many famous artists, which of course you can get the styles of from carefully constructed prompts. But he's imagining those images, those classic images, and those artists, if they had the condition of a laryngectomy and had to encounter that and deal with that in their own lives, such as the portrait of a man with a laryngectomy in the style of Velasquez. And then when he's sort of pushing these things out onto the internet, they're alongside this narrative of his own life as he's struggling with sort of this transformation, this becoming transformed by a process beyond his control. And what I think is this sort of really moving and interesting narrative that wouldn't manifest itself, or he wouldn't be able to have that sort of catharsis in the same way if he wasn't interacting with and producing the AI images in this manner. So my sort of conclusion here is that AI-driven creativity is meaningful to and only with humans. So that's some really basic observations, but what I think is this very interesting moment for human creativity. And just to conclude, I had a really incredible couple of weeks and then a couple of funding applications that I've had in progress for 3 years have both been approved. One is the Extending Digital Narrative project, where we'll be examining 3 kinds of narrative or 3 technology platforms, XR, conversational interfaces, and AI narrative, and just seeing what that's doing to storytelling. And then we just got approved the Center for Digital Narrative, which is it's a Norwegian Center of Research Excellence that's going to involve a lot of people from different disciplines who are going to be looking at the specific question of digital narrative in diverse forms in electronic literature, computer games, XR, computational narrative systems, and the narratives such as conspiracy theories or the political narratives that resulted in really strange political upheavals over the last years, and how those evolve, all from the standpoint of algorithmic narrativity, a combination of the human ability to understand experience through narrative with the power of the computer to manipulate symbols and generate data. And we have a lot of really great scholars working on this, both people who are already on our team at the University of Bergen, but also a number of Professor Twos, people who, including Caitlin, who you've heard from, who will be coming in 20% positions and doing research with us, as well as a whole scatter of PhD students and postdoc researchers, and will be advised by an advisory board of people from, again, a variety of different fields that this touches on. So this is all, that's all super exciting. And that's it, yeah.
Congratulations, can I have a smile?
Thanks.
A smile for the record. Fantastic. Yeah, lots of questions. We're going to switch the machine around now. So if you can also come around here, and we'll be ready for our keynote as well. I'll take, if you come here and if you give me the HDMI. Thank you. Around the corner, please.
Oh, it's stuck on the royal pillow. I didn't, maybe I should just sit here. once.
You can sit there for the Q&A. Us peon questioners can be here. So let's just wait for the projector. So you guys can still hear us, correct?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, Caitlin is nodding. Okay, we'll start here with Fabian. And please, if you have a question online, there will be people here. Just jump
Here,
in.
I'll go to that side. So that
Okay.
our usual queue up thing. Yeah.
You mentioned at some point the size of those networks and the few companies that actually have the power to run them, and it's something that I find just problematic, and especially since, let's say, compared to Photoshop or whatever tool somebody would use until now, most of that creative process or Word or whatever would stay on the machine of that person. Here, the prompts, let's say, for a lot of those tools are then gathered by those few companies that have the power to run that. How do you think that changes the creative process? How do you think that's going to be used by them? How much are we both, earning or gaining, we see, but losing also in terms of agency by doing that?
Well, I would say in a way we crossed the Rubicon with that a while ago when we gave Google essentially the entirety of human language already. That they have that repository, and they haven't yet really opened that up. Having said that, I think that the power of computation on individual computers is also increasing exponentially as it always has. And the level, the fact that it turns out to be better to use slightly less computation on larger data sets, which themselves are not the thing that, it's not the storage that's the problem, it's the computation. So, there might well be a future in which we're not so wedded to the cloud as we are right now. But of course, this is disturbing, that the power that we've already given over to meta interfaces is disturbing. They're more powerful than any government right now, right? So not to knock Apple.
I really loved your demonstrations of the visible here. Hi. I loved your demonstrations of the story prompts about the forest fire, but it also to me underscored the way in which the sort of the shallowness of what GPT and other things are doing, and that that AI doesn't have any intention to dictate any policy about forest fires. It was just answering on the basis of corpus of data of people speaking about it. And to that end, it sort of made it all the more acutely clear that what it is doing is just what Jaron was saying yesterday, regurgitatively sort of retrieving and interpolating across documents, where internet search is serving a specific page. All this is doing, it's an incredible feat, obviously, but interpolating between multiple sources and sort of retrieving a surface of multiple kind of resources that are then sort of stitched together. And that is amazing, but I still struggle to characterize it as artificial intelligence per se, rather than incredible information retrieval. And you can take that to say that maybe intelligence isn't what we think it is, but yeah, where do you sit with that at this point?
Well, I again would separate intelligence from cognition, and whatever we call intelligence. Consciousness, I consider that to be the sort of reserved category. I think there's, as I said, I'm actually I somehow got involved in this weird committee where it's Norwegian and American research collaboration, and it's specifically with the Department of Energy. So I'm having these meetings with people who run the national labs who are dealing actually with these types of questions, which is, when you have a massive disaster response, how do you use AI to allocate resources? Yeah, and I know that the types of systems that they're developing are trained. They're trained on human language, but they're also trained on, you know, when they're managing the nuclear stockpile, for instance, they're working with different data sets. So hopefully we can trust that the systems will be a little bit more responsible or a little bit more informed. However, we also have this Weizenbaum problem, right? Where people are going to be conversing with these systems as if they were their psychologists, or as if they had the answer, when in fact they're just really large structured aleatory language systems. Yeah.
Oh, can you introduce yourself as well first?
Yes, I'm Gerard, head of UX in Format. We are working in this special canvas where we have different agents working with your text and making different tasks. So here, a little bit, my question, we are exploring a lot how we can put different prompts and this, how this prompt influences on the output of the large language model and everything. And at the end, what we are experiencing a lot, it's like, okay, if we embody these prompts or these different definitions of language within these buttons, people are starting like seeing, or they put some expectations on the final output that they will receive. No, here my question is how this work that prompt engineers or people who are exploring the prompting as a language or prompting as an interface to these large language models, how this would be, or how do you imagine that this will be explorable for like end users, more not as a consumers, but also as a thinkers or creators?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I loved your tool when I saw it yesterday. I mean, I think that that there's going to be kind of two different directions people are going with prompts. One of which is more boring to me, and one of which is more exciting. The exciting version of this to me is that we use the prompts actually to get something that we did not expect. What people are doing right now with sort of prompt engineering, or trying to replace their graphic designer with DALL-E 2, is trying to write these very minutely precise prompts to get them exactly what they expect. Whereas I think the real creativity is going to come from, oh, look, the system really surprised me and pushed me in a different direction, where I'm going somewhere, you know, creatively that I never would have thought. I always think of of systems like this as being kind of constraints. So I think of George Perec and the novel that he wrote without using the letter E. And the reason why he chose to not use the letter E, which is a sort of an absurd and very challenging constraint, was that he was writing about the death of his parents in the Holocaust. And he couldn't get there. He couldn't write about it without being able to think about this other problem. And then what resulted, you know, was a great novel that he wouldn't have been able to write otherwise. So that sort of strange displacement, I think, is where really interesting creativity comes from.
Yeah, and here, like follow-up questions on this. I mean, it's super practical at the end. It's like, okay, when you're trying to define this prompt, as you were saying, you're trying to define an unexpected output. So how do you imagine like people having or balancing this expectation of the output versus having something that I don't actually expect, but kind of in the direction that I expect? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, for one thing, we don't need to be religious about obeying the output of the system. We can erase the last line that the system gave us and continue playing with it until we, you know, I mean, there's people who want to test the systems and see how accurate they can be. As artists, I don't think we really need to care about that. We take what it gives us, and then it inspires us to move in different directions. And I think that's where a really interesting digital narrative production process is going to come from. So, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.